Thank you all for joining this first of a 5-part webinar series exploring aspects of the long-term planning and implementation of smart distribution grids. My name is Terry Jo Lovass, and I am the ISGAN Communications Working Group Leader. Next slide, please. So our agenda today is that I will be introducing you to a little bit about ISGAN and the Lighthouse Project. Then I will hand over to Branny to explain the Lighthouse Framework. Finally, our panel will answer questions about this phase. Next slide. ISGAN is the International Smart Grids Action Network. It is an International Energy Agency technology collaboration program for a cooperative program on smart grids and an initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial. That's a really long way of saying the IEA and CEM are parent organizations. Next slide. We are a group of national experts from 25 countries and the European Commission committed to supporting the global shift towards smarter and more reliable electricity distribution systems, which are key to meeting clean energy goals. On the right here is a list of our current focus areas. Next slide. Our vision is to accelerate progress on key aspects of smart grid policy, technology, and investment through voluntary participation by governments and their designees in specific projects and programs. We implement this through the facilitation of dynamic knowledge sharing, technical assistance, peer review, and project coordination between contracting parties in the areas of policy, finance and business models, technology system development, workforce skills and knowledge, and user and consumer engagement. Next slide. Activities we leverage to achieve this include outputs such as policy briefs, technical and discussion papers, conference presentations, and webinars like this one. As you can see, we are engaged in many different aspects of smart grid development and deployment. I could spend this entire hour talking about those engagements, but that's not the purpose of today's session. If you would like to know more about what we do, please visit our website. I will tell you that the website is currently undergoing extensive renovations to bring you a more accessible experience in the future. So if you do visit, excuse the temporary mess. Next slide. So how does the Lighthouse Project fit into ISGAN? As the members of ISGAN explored the planning and implementation of smart distribution grids, it became apparent that those processes include many external, influencing forces and actors with diverse roles and goals. This often results in actors operating in silos, under conditions of uncertainty, and within governance frameworks that are slow to adapt. In 2023, I think we're actually a slide ahead right now, so just stay there for a moment, please. In 2023, the Lighthouse Project was launched to facilitate collaboration between these actors and across countries and sectors, helping to overcome challenges like fragmented planning and slow policy changes. It was decided that the initial focus area of the Lighthouse Project should be long-term planning and implementation of smart distribution grids under uncertainty, with the vision of utilizing this to increase ISGAN's impact, accelerating the energy transition by mobilizing actors in new ways around smart grid knowledge. Having the ISGAN community mobilized around this unified theme and employing a synergistic project structure enables us to connect different knowledge and perspectives, joining forces and exploring new ways of working. In doing this, we engage more effectively with our stakeholders, resulting in more impactful and cohesive external communications. This promotes practical solutions and long-term thinking. The initiative aims to strengthen global efforts to modernize energy systems through shared learning and innovation. Next slide. Phase 1 of the Lighthouse Project took place from November 2023 to October 2024 and resulted in a series of tangible outcomes, including a policy brief presented at SEM 17, a pilot of the Knowledge Hub, a global workshop series, new collaboration between ISGAN Working Groups 3 and 7, enhanced online communication, and a framework on long-term planning and implementation. That framework is what we will be exploring during this workshop series. Next. Phase 2 of the Lighthouse Project began in October 2024 and is even more ambitious, with activities around a knowledge sharing process focused on improving coordination and collaboration between key actors, The development of a casebook showcasing pioneering global examples of innovation in long-term planning and implementation of smart grids. The progression of the Knowledge Hub is a resource for people to learn more about the framework. You will find a link to the Knowledge Hub at the bottom of the Lighthouse website page, the address of which is provided at the bottom of this slide and hopefully in the chat pretty soon. Other activities include workshops with key actor groups to explore challenges and opportunities in advancing grid planning processes, deep dive activities by ISGAN working groups on key technologies and aspects relevant to the Lighthouse project theme, collaboration with other international organizations and work streams, and this webinar series focused around the new framework developed in phase 1 of the Lighthouse project. These activities will combine to deliver a set of high-impact knowledge products to be launched in conjunction with the Clean Energy Ministerial next year. Now, I have referenced the framework for forward-looking, long-term planning of smart distribution grids a couple of times now. I will pass over to Brani Igler at this point to explore that in a bit more detail. Brani is with the Austrian Institute of Technology and leads ISGAN's Working Group 7, which focuses on smart grid transitions. Over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello from my side. We'll speak a bit about the framework, Lighthouse framework that we have developed, implementing right now. So as previously mentioned, planning smart sustainable distribution grid is a complex and involves many stakeholders. The framework developed in Lighthouse phase 1 basically provides us a structured approach to improve understanding and global dialogue. It helps us to navigate system complexity and multidimensional uncertainties and fosters shared understanding and collaboration in long-term grid planning. The framework consists of 3 fundamental components. The first being the framework conditions that are underpinning a forward-looking planning process. These are fundamental conditions to enable a proactive planning process. Then key actor groups with formal roles and responsibilities in the planning process. And then the 5 phases of the long-term planning and implementation. These are basically foresight, strategic decision-making, long-term planning, assessment and decision support, and implementation. The first 2 webinars will focus on the first 2 phases. Basically, we decided here to merge both phases together to basically speak about the early development of the grid planning and to see which questions remain here open and which answers we can provide. We have decided to do 2 webinars. The first one today, September 10th, that will focus on the challenges for these early planning stages. And the second one will be on October 1st at the same time, that will where we will discuss the solutions. Today we have 3 experts who are our panelists. The first one, Klaus Kubeczko, my colleague from the Innovation Systems and Policy Department at AIT, who does his research since many years on transformation governance, and is also a long-term expert and founder of the Working Group 7, where we work. And Julio Braslavsky from Australia, who is a senior principal research scientist with the power systems team of TIRO. TIRO is the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization. And the third one, Professor Pratapan Moodley, who is the General Manager at the South African National Energy Development Institute, SANEDI, and heads up the Applied Energy Research Development and Innovation Division. First, Klaus will give us some insights on the topic of foresight and strategic decision planning.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to explain a little bit the background of these first two phases of the long-term planning process. With the growing demand for electricity and the challenges for the electricity systems architecture to integrate renewable energy, it is imperative to make low and medium voltage grids future-proof. The International Energy Agency estimates that the global smart grid investments, therefore, must nearly double by 2030 to over $600 billion US dollars per year and even more in the future, emphasizing the need for upscaling and digitalization of thousands of local distribution grids. So extensive investment in smart grids are now recognized by national and regional policymakers as challenge for them and many other players with their responsibilities, which should be dealt with differently than by leaving it to only the utilities and the regulatory bodies. It means energy security, affordability, and service quality could be compromised in the future by the uncertainties that we are facing without coordinated action. So why traditional grid planning is no longer sufficient? Traditional grid planning relies on reactive and static methodologies. However, today, energy landscape demand shifts to and has to shift towards a proactive and adaptive planning approach. I'll come to that later. The key difference is flexibility and interaction. Planning must be done in cycles with adjustment based on real-world challenges and changes. Embracing complexity, scenario-based planning and risk assessment are essential. We have to move beyond the historical data as basis for decision-making. Decision-making must be supported by real-time data, strategic intelligence, and advanced modeling. From a blueprint to process, planning must become an ongoing and adaptive process rather than a static roadmap development kind of exercise. The message maybe to be given is to do long-term planning operationally at utility and at local authorities for spatial planning, for example. The two phases can hardly be left out. So why this phase? Why do we have these two phases? Why do we have the first phase of foresight and strategic intelligence? Building on shared intelligence and stakeholder engagement makes decision-making much more resilient, forward-looking, and adaptable to future challenges and opportunities. Why should actors be involved? Actor groups with stakeholders in strategic grid planning can align decisions based on shared strategic intelligence and foresight. This phase is critical for ensuring that strategic decisions and plans are based on robust, actionable information, even if accurate predictions of the future requirements of the grid cannot be made anymore. The aim is to reach comprehensive understanding, needs and challenges, and to see how the future distribution grid may develop. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an overview, and I cannot go into all the details of it. The difference between reactive planning and this proactive adaptive planning approach that is suggested in our Lighthouse project. So rather than going into details, let me highlight a few key distinctions: the flexibility and interaction, the strategic intelligence over historical trends, and embracing the complexity. We must incorporate scenario-based planning, risk assessment, and resilient measures to navigate and have a more unpredictable energy landscape. Ultimately, we need to shift the mindset from this static blueprint to an ongoing process that can effectively manage long-term uncertainties. Next slide, please. So what are the key activities, outcomes, and key issues to be considered? Data collection and analysis is the first point. There have to be data collected and future energy trends identified, like emerging technologies, but most of all, energy demand, how the system develops, how behavior practices on the grid edge develop. The long-term scenario planning has to explore potential scenarios and develop multiple future pathways to anticipate different outcomes of challenges. So a plurality of pathways that can then lead to strategic decision-making. And most importantly, strategic stakeholder engagement is necessary. Engage the experts, government, and other stakeholders to gather insights and perspectives. Outcomes that we are expecting are a strategic foresight report that guides the decision-making planning process, not only of one actor, but collectively by many actors. Yeah, so some of the key issues, and I cannot go into details here, unfortunately, are the participatory foresight process that has to be established. There has to be a kind of horizon scanning involved for emerging issues that usually are not seen by all actors at the same time. There has to be a reflection on the basic assumptions also of modeling and of planning then in the later phases of operational long-term planning. And societal, environmental, and economic perspectives have to be considered in this phase, and understanding the perspectives of other actor groups and particularly also of the grid users at the grid edge. The transparency and the trust in foresight process outcomes then provides legitimacy for the next phase, which is then the phase 2 of strategic decision-making. The second phase of strategic decision-making, in each of the actor organizations with responsibilities and a mandate to develop long-term grid plans, are advised to come up with a clear strategic position. So from the foresight activities, the actors are involved, and that is something we haven't discussed yet, is that the actors in this, at least in these first 2 phases, are ministries, municipalities, regulatory bodies, grid owners, and the utilities. This phase deals with how the grid development should look like and how to reach a new state of the grid in line with its mission. The strategic decisions are both for the overall network planning, planning what capacity is needed, as well as for the more concrete planning regarding how to realize the access to these capacities. This includes resilience criteria, critical and criteria for guaranteeing access to electricity, as a universal basic service or an essential service, depending on how countries interpret this. And that's for all households and businesses that are connected to the grid. The key activities are that were also identified in the several workshops that we had over the last years, to identify strategic options, to do multi-criteria analysis with the information available from the Foresight, to do a risk assessment, to do policy alignment exercises, and in the end, finally, to develop strategic guidelines, basic principles and guidelines for the long-term planning process. The outcome, as this is an exercise, considered as an exercise that's done mostly within organizations, a strategic document or white paper which serves as foundation and guidance for the strategic long-term planning of the organization, and then based on that, the operational planning can be a formal outcome to communicate this also to the stakeholders. It should provide an in-depth analysis of trends and drivers, identify potential opportunities and threats. Thus, it can inform the strategic directions and the consequences for the planning process. So basically, that was an introduction into the topic to give an overview for the following discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. And we are perfect in time for the discussion. I would straight jump in and start with the first question, which is, what do you see as the current challenges putting pressure on the activities within these two first phases, so within Foresight and strategic decision making? Julio, maybe we start with you.
Okay. Thanks, Igar. Can you guys hear me? Just checking.
Excellent, thank you.
Perfect. Probably one defining challenge in Australia is that the power industry is highly fragmented. This poses challenges in developing and implementing policies, regulations, system planning, and operation. We have regulations that are at the level of the country, national regulations, but also have another set of regulations that go statewide. And each state have may have different regulations that with variations across states. Also, the industry, there's many transmission distribution companies. They are separate buildings, separate from the system operator, separate from retailers. It's a fragmented industry, so it's very challenging to get everybody on the same page. That certainly is one defining challenge that shaped the way we're trying to advance the transition of our systems in Australia.
Interesting, thank you. What about South Africa?
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity. I think like almost every other country across the world, each country has its own nuances. South Africa is no different. I think we've recently, maybe just to set the scene, as a country, we've recently had a lot of challenges when it came to energy security, which is just a nice way of saying that our demand has exceeded supply for a very long period of time. And we had to as from a national perspective, deal with a thing called load shedding, which is essentially rotational blackouts. And I think that put a lot of emphasis around re-looking at the electricity or the power sector in South Africa. A lot of work has gone from a national perspective with all stakeholders, being it government, regulators, local authorities, and even operators of various distribution grids around reform. There's been a lot of effort going from a vertically operated kind of monopoly environment to a much more liberalized environment. And I think a lot of work had to be done in a very short space of time. Also, just as a developing country, whilst there's a lot of energy transition happening on a global basis, a developing country has a dual conundrum, because demand, just because of it being a developing country, is increasing at a very substantial rate. So you have to plan for that increased demand, and then the energy transition does then emphasize and create that exponential rise in demand, which does create a lot of planning challenges into the future. The other one, which I think is probably also important to mention, is whilst many countries in the world have universal access to electricity, South Africa has gotten to about 93% universal access. So it's a key priority for government to cover the last 7%, which does mean about 1.6 million households has never had access to electricity. So very interesting solutions are being thought of around universal access and affordability of electricity in our country, including things like off-grid solutions, microgrids, and then hybrid solutions. So whilst there are a lot of challenges, I think many of these actions that's taken place over the recent few months and has actually catalyzed the development of a lot more coordination amongst various actors to deal with strategic long-term planning, to enable a market, to also embrace a lot of the new technologies, including distributed generation or rooftop PV, distributed storage technologies, and then really looking at adopting smart technologies to help with the modernization of the distribution grid. So as much as there have been challenges, I think a lot of fruits of these challenges have contributed to a lot more coordination and planning from a distribution perspective in South Africa.
I think it's always really nice to hear about the challenges that other countries around the world have regarding the power supply and the expectations, how it develops. You know, we within Europe have our own world and rarely come across to see to come into the discussion. But which of course doesn't mean that we have no problems and no challenges. So would like to ask Klaus to maybe explain the situation in Austria for as a European country. Klaus.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, in the Austrian case, I mean, in Europe, we have this legal basis now for long-term planning, so that distribution grid operators have to do this 10-year long-term planning and revolving every 2 years, so similar to the transmission grid operators, which is a step forward towards becoming more proactive, but still it's difficult to change mindsets, and when you have the methodologies in the planning process that used to work for a very long time to come to other processes. I think the most important challenge here is still getting the right actors on board. I mean, also from the experiences we had in the Lighthouse project, examples of regions where this reactive planning process led to failure to get more industry into the region and to electrify into the region, which is a matter of politicians, and it's not a matter of the utility. If the utility is kept alone, this is rather not the way where things can be decided on the long term. So regional authorities with mandate for regional spatial and infrastructure planning should be involved in the second point, and that, as far as I understand, is often the case, at least in the European and Austrian context, to include the grid owners, because the mandate for the management is not long enough and for these decisions on the long term, and this these huge investments that have to be made. So what I mean is, although we have no vertical integration, we have still a lot of public ownership. So that means that basically mayors, for example, have to be involved as the owners, representative of the owner of the grids, to make those long-term decisions, or be involved in these long-term decisions and develop guidelines. The second point is that comes with that those huge costs that we are facing are questioned to have to be carried by the current generation, as we are dealing with a long-term change of the structural change of the electricity grid. This is a similar development than for the last 100 years in many countries. So the future grid will hopefully also last longer than one generation. So the costs cannot be just put on the customer's side on the kilowatt hour. So there through these high uncertainties, then the problem arises of bankability with unpredictable outcomes of how the future will look like.
Let us just stay in Austria for the second question. I mean, it has been talked about already a bit, because, you know, if you speak about challenges, you also speak about the business as usual. But can we just continue? Can we cope with these challenges when we do as we did so far?
Well, there are different layers to it. The first is that this long-term planning process is just established, so that is going beyond the business as usual, but the habits, the practices with the actors that so far have been involved remain the same. What is needed to add and to have methodologies that are not yet applied in order to do this strategic intelligence and the foresight, and to bring together the decision makers on the regional level, so those who really build and who build other infrastructures as well at the same time, who have to get the streets open, and they don't want to do it all the time. So this could be still a structured process.
Why do you think that these solutions are not yet used in these early phases? Is it that they are not developed or not available?
Well, on the partly those are used already on the transmission system operation level, but not on the distribution level, and the information is not available for the many smaller distribution grid operators that we have in Austria, for example, that just don't have the time, the resources, the knowledge to do it, and who often depend on political decisions that they cannot influence. So they are widely in the dark when it comes to this long-term planning.
Julio, you mentioned the fragmented structures as one of the challenges. Yeah. How is it right now in Australia? Do you think that this is something that hinders the planning? Is it something that you can imagine to go on with in the future?
I think because of this particular challenge of being so fragmented, that led to a way of working out the say our iterative roadmap for the system transition in a particular way, which is defined by being an open and transparent and consultative process. So we have an integrated system plan that is run by AEMO, is the Australian energy market operator, and the system operator for the largest systems in Australia, mostly one's large, very large, the largest system in the east and two smaller networks in the west. So this process is essentially a roadmap that is live, that is renewed every 2 years with new projections, new data, new levelized cost of technologies, and is refreshed. So we had the last one, so it started in 2018, and it has been running. So the last one was last year, 2024. So between 2024 and 2026 is when all these consultations happen, and that is completely open to the whole industry. So everybody can put submissions. There's a draft that is put out in the intermediate year, so 2025. There's already a draft and some of the assumptions. So the main inputs that go into the next plan, they are put in a public domain, so everybody can put submissions. There are webinars, there are workshops. So because the industry is so fragmented, that's the only way that we can achieve some consensus. So in a way that was defined, so that way to operate on, but actually is possibly the only way to do it, unless everything is again put back together into a vertically integrated system, which I think is much harder to happen. So, but that has been working, and at least whenever a new plan comes out, there's a predominant consensus that everybody's on board with what is put there, and that is very important to new businesses. So it provides guarantees that, okay, this is a solid way of developing this ongoing iterative road mapping that is refreshed every 2 years. So essentially, it's a roadmap that plans what the system needs to change to reach 2050 net zero by 2050, and with some intermediate targets. So at the moment, Australia has more than half the capacity in generation comes from rooftop solar, which is a decentralized rooftop solar. So that brings a lot of other challenges. But at least the general plan of the system and what transmission, what HVDC interconnectors need to be put in place, what new regulations need to come. So it's a process that is continuously happening, and it's open and it's public and it's consultative. So yeah, it's all available online as well. So it's called the Integrated System Plan. So
basically, you have a roadmap to also establish a common understanding on what the plan is, and also enable the strategies of the actors to be adapted to this common plan, or to give remarks, objections, and so on, to be considered in a common process.
indeed, it serves to provide, it has a regulatory purpose, because it can identify what are the actionable projects which have consensus and people see as actually feasible. So they can be, in a way, can be progressed as soon as possible.
Interesting. To South Africa, Pratapan, you mentioned the big challenge being the electrification, the target of the 100% electrification. Do you need to undergo reforms or changes from your perspective in order to reach this? I mean, I can imagine that this can lead to a situation where islanding solutions are being then deployed, or people organize somehow and these days it's not such a big challenge to have a generator or a PV on a rooftop. Is this something that the current way can cope with?
No, absolutely. I think the challenge around just normal electrification to households is a rather large one. The ambition from the government, the South African government, is to achieve this target by the end of this decade, which is a mammoth challenge. It does require a lot of reform and changes in terms of various actors, including local regulations at the distribution level, involvement from local authorities in the local municipalities, but it also involves a conscious decision around finding ways to localize the solution. So the manufacture of rooftop PV, the inverters, the batteries, all of the balance of plant technologies is very deliberate, but also very deliberate looking at financial models for rolling out these solutions. So it is a multifaceted approach and rather complex. It also needs a lot of buy-in from the local communities to embrace the technologies. I think part of the challenge is around things like you will not have power experts that would look after a isolated microgrid solution for a community or for a granular home. And how do you ensure that you engineer the solution so that it doesn't require that skills level, and it does become far more operational and maintainable over a long period of time. So there's a lot of thinking and a lot of effort that's involved in the electrification aspects in South Africa. But I think on the grid side, it's also equally interesting. I think we've got government-led programs around the municipal environment called the Just Energy Transition, or JET, as it's commonly known in South Africa. There's a specific program that is focused predominantly on municipalities and the distribution environment, including the electricity distribution industry, EDI reforms. And I think whilst they are very mature processes on the grid side to do master plans, which is the traditional way of long-term planning for network development plans over a 10-year horizon, I think there's a recognition that these plans need to be tweaked and bringing in new methodologies to be much more agile and flexible. We've also seen in our environment, because of the energy security challenges, there's been a lot of changes in, for example, regulations that were removed for adopting a distributed generation, which led to an explosion of rooftop PV. At this stage, we've got about 6 gigawatts of rooftop PV behind the meter, which is equivalent to all of the renewable utility scale renewable generation that's connected to predominantly transmission and sub-transmission. So so there's been changes in regulation. There's been also tax incentives for consumers to adopt the technology. There's also been a lot of grants that government's now made to adopt smart meters so that we have several capabilities of revenue enhancement, of visibility of the localized distribution network across municipalities. And all of these changes have forced all of these actors to come together to plan a future modernized distribution grid. We know that it's not going to be guaranteed, but we need to be very mindful that there are changes from a technology perspective. There's changes from a variety of different inputs, and you have to be agile and flexible to deal with long-term planning, as well as having the vision of getting to net zero by 2050. And predominantly, most of the renewable technologies are connected to our distribution infrastructure. Maybe just to highlight a key difference in South Africa is that we define our distribution networks at 132 kV and below, which is almost transmission level. So it hosts quite a bit of renewable technology, storage technologies, and so forth. So we do have to get our planners, distribution network planners, of fay with all of these planning processes to meet our ambition of net zero by 2050.
It's really interesting. I would like to stay with the distribution. So we go to the next question. What are the needs of grid operators, the utilities, with regards to these early planning phases? Do you have experience? Are they open to new solutions? Is this is something that they are interested in, and where they get actively involved? Are they even actively involved? You mentioned the grid development plans. How is this going on?
Yes, so I think there's a lot of embracing of kind of the future planning of the distribution infrastructure from various grid operators, predominantly in South Africa, because we are still in a reform process. Most of our distribution grid operators are state-owned by local government, so they are the owner operators. But what we've also observed in South Africa is that there's a lot of, let's say, future solutions towards both short-term and long-term needs of the South African grid. In the short term, there was a lot of emphasis on demand side management as well as energy efficiency. So the grid operators have embraced a lot of the technologies, but also the modernization and smartification of the distribution grid around dispatchable demand response technologies in the country. But I think also in terms of the future, there's a lot of embracing of the new types of loads, including new loads like electric vehicles that are imminent in the country. The expansion of the grid because of our large geographical area, we need to move power from very remote places to distant load centers. So there's a big ambition around the expansion of the grid and finding solutions to also get public-private partnerships, bringing that into the fore in the electricity distribution industry. So a lot of work has been going on in South Africa on the needs from a planning perspective of grid operators, but also from an operational aspect of balancing the local supply demand, balancing the stability of the grid, harmonics, disturbances, and so forth. And all of that is very new to our industry in the local distribution industry. But a lot of I think excitement to embrace technologies and the solutions that's needed for essentially the strategic foresight and the scenario planning.
Interesting, thank you. What about the situation in Australia, Julio? How are the Australian utilities looking at the changes or the need for a change in the early planning stages?
I think the industry is taking on the changes, and in some states they're faster than others. They're because of how they are connected to the interconnected system. So the two states that are at the extremes of the interconnected systems are the ones that usually have to take action more immediately. For example, in South Australia, they regularly run their network, which is a system of about 3 gigawatts capacity for the state. They have about 3 gigawatts of solar. So many times the system runs entirely from rooftop solar, including industrial loads. So that poses several challenges. So at distribution level is congestion and managing congestion at times where there's not enough demand. The other one is making sure that the excess generation that is mostly non-dispatchable, because these are all inverters with the old version of the standard, and they don't have much communication or no communication whatsoever. So when there are critical times, they need to manage so they can still maintain system security by keeping a minimum number of synchronous machines in operation to maintain frequency regulation and voltage reference in the limits. So that's a very defining challenge in states like in South Australia, which is probably one of the most exposed. It has interconnection to the next state there's a small HVDC but a small capacity and a larger capacity that is an AC, high voltage AC. So therefore, that also shaped the way they try to maintain that security. and they continue then. They install synchronous condensers, which is an old technology, and that was done a few years ago. And they decided that over the alternative of having smart grid-forming inverters with large batteries, essentially because those few years ago, grid-forming inverters were not quite there to give them confidence that it could provide the solutions. That's still the case to some extent, although the technology had advanced enormously. And in many cases, there have been many trials. But it is slow for some industry, for some sectors of the industry to gain confidence on this technology. For example, the states that are more secure, that are in the middle of an interconnected system, they continue pretty much with their business as usual, transmission, developing more infrastructure, thinking mostly on synchronous condensers, because they still don't have the confidence to go all the way with the newer technologies. So that is a challenge, because in a way, their business model is hardwired to the older technologies. So it takes a while until the whole company, until that also is changed. So it's the way the company operates and the way they do their planning is somehow hardwired to the older technologies. So that takes a while. It's not just trialing and adopt and seeing whether the new technologies work. It's also changing their processes and the revenue streams. So from the part of the regulators, it's a matter of promoting and rewarding good behavior for the system. But yeah, it's those are still working solutions. So that's Australia, I guess, the industry is learning as it goes, and some parts are going faster than others, and that serves as a model, and provides some learnings to other sectors in the network, in the industry. Distribution that led to time varying capacity limits is something that definitely is something that has been adopted countrywide.
It's interesting that this different speed in the industry is something that you see almost everywhere around the world. So situation that we have to cope with in Austria. We are unfortunately at the end of the webinar, but Klaus, do you want to give a last from your side?
Apart from what has been discussed, or to some extent it has been discussed, the data availability for all phases of the planning process, also for the first phase. This requires coordinated efforts to bring data together, which with AI capacities now might be much easier and much more transparent. So I think that is one of the framework conditions for the grid development and for the planning processes, apart from the legal aspects, apart from the methodological aspects of agreement and the information flows also between the different actors. Those are not yet ideal. One could say it could be improved, and that leads, that is the basis for the whole of the process in some extent, up to the level of the operators then really do the operational planning.
Thank you so much. Thanks also to our other panelists. Julio, I believe it's already in the evening in Australia, so we wish you a nice evening. Pratavan, you have the same time zone as we in Europe, so probably more than lunchtime. I would like to thank you for the discussion. It's really interesting. Please dial in also for our next webinar, which will be on October 1st. You can register. My colleague Matteo just included the link to the registration for the second webinar. It will be focused on solutions. So, Carrie Jo, did we lose you?
No, I'm here.
Anything that I forgot to mention? Of course, please visit the website of our Lighthouse project. At this stage, also very big thanks to Helena Lindqvist, who's the mastermind and the main driver of the Lighthouse project, which is now in the second phase. We're very excited what comes then next. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity
Bye.
to share. Thank you.